morning, everyone. Today I'll be talking about the Fraktur of Mary Elizabeth Haushiel. Taufschein, or German-American baptismal certificates, were two-dimensional, often handcrafted objects that created ties for people to both their past and present. Due to their traditional roots in continental Europe, these specific types of Fraktur connected owners to their ancestors and the larger community, where they could feel grounded and a part of a formed culture distinct from the chaos and turmoil that was early frontier America. German-American Taufschein often reflect a more secular tone, but the roots of the Christian meaning of baptism largely shine through in both the text and the decoration of the document. Within the collections of the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts is the work of the Air Fahter Artist, an unknown Fraktur artist who created many pieces, largely Taufschein, in communities throughout the East Coast. This artist's work is a prime example of the adaptation of American tastes to European traditions. He retains the Germanic Gothic lettering as well as the traditional information and catechisms or prayers displayed on the piece, while also developing a subtle visual vocabulary that includes natural, architectural, and geometric forms to both entertain the eye and imbue the piece with subtle meanings. Whether or not German settlers recognized this mastery of a new form of early American art or not cannot be determined, but the large body of work still remaining that is attributed to this particular artist shows that he was very popular. In the society centered around the St. John's Lutheran Church in Newberry County, South Carolina, the Air Fahter artist's work serve as a physical connections between the extended family and the community at large around the church. The art of the Taufschein has its origins in 16th century European baptismal certificates called Patenbrief, written, painted, or printed paper with which the sponsor or godparent wrapped the gift of money for his godchild. Not only could they be folded to hold money, but the decoration and writing served as a record of birth and baptism, offered congratulations, memorialized an important religious event, and celebrated the meaning of baptism. These early portable documents traveled with families on the ships to America when there was little room to bring anything else of value. Within the new German settlements of 18th century Pennsylvania, these highly religious pieces took on more secular feeling as they employed new forms of design, usage of earthly objects within decoration, and a lack of specifically religious symbols. However, the undercurrents of religious meaning still remain through actual content in the pieces, as well as through more subtle symbolism. Once Friedrich S. Weitzer introduced new understandings of the significance and cultural meaning of Fraktur in his influential 1973 Winterthur portfolio article, material culture scholars looked more deeply at the examples of Fraktur art already identified from early America. Two highly influential articles were published in the Journal of Early Southern Decorative Arts in 1975 and in 1979 on Fraktur of the Air Fahter Artist in the South, the first by John Bivens Jr. and the second by Christian Colby and Brent Holcomb. The works of this artist have been found in Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and purportedly Canada. Despite his location in North America, the artist retained a core stock of general format and images that were rooted in ancient texts such as the Physiologus, a Greek text from the 2nd century CE that described animals and plants and provided them with meanings or moral content. A variety of artisans over hundreds of years adapted these early texts and symbols into their work, creating a symbolic vocabulary, whether conscious or not, that remains powerful today. The Taufschein of Maria Margaretha Haushiel, located at the Museum of Early Southern Decorative Arts, is a beautiful and well-preserved example of the Air Fahter artist's work. The piece is 16 1/3 inches by 19 inches and consists of ink and watercolor on woven paper that contains 2 watermarks. Pre-conservation, the paper was slightly yellowed and fraying at the edges with some tearing along what could be creasing lines. The vertical formatting of the piece is standard. It is written entirely in German and bears the Air Vater und Mutter arched heading that the artist is known for. The artist wrote the child's name in scarlet ink under the arc. He neatly drew the text as well as the imagery throughout the piece and delicately colored it in bright shades of yellow, pink, scarlet, blue, blue-green, and green. Doubtless the ink would have been brighter upon its creation, but the colors have held well and have not faded significantly nor eaten through the paper. The section of text in the bottom half of the page constitutes a prayer. The alternating lines of black and scarlet ink are also written in German. The imagery of the piece is dominated by the two spotted parrots facing each other and sitting on flowered stalks on either side of the devotional text. They have more elongated necks than the artist's normal birds, perhaps recalling imagery of the self-sacrificial pelican that was another popular Fraktur representation. Both parrots are colored in the same way, though the bird on the right appears to have a red and blue crest, more than likely denoting it as male. The hatching and shading along the wings and body give a feeling of three-dimensionality, a recognizable technique of the Air Fahter Artist. The traditional meaning of parrots within Christian art springs from their ability to talk. Parrots became aligned with the idea of the Immaculate Conception because they came from the exotic East, where the Annunciation took place, and because of the old idea that conception occurred through the ear or hearing. In any case, the plethora of birds present in Fraktur imagery closely aligns with the idea that the singing of the birds constitutes an offering to God. The highly stylized flowers that the birds are sitting on are hard to label with certainty, but they may represent lilies. As representations of purity and virtue, and being closely aligned with the Virgin Mary, the lily would be an incredibly appropriate symbol on a Taufstein, especially since it is the most prominent flower on the page. The smaller sprigs of flowers that decorate the top section of the Fraktur, especially the capital letters of E, V, and M, appear to be smaller versions of the possible lilies, for they follow the same general form of the larger, matured flora. The three flowers on the thin vine underneath the arched title are almost certainly roses, especially in their tripartite presentation. In traditional Christian meaning, 3 roses symbolize the Holy Trinity, significant in a baptism where the child is receiving the Holy Ghost. The rose was also closely allied with the Virgin Mary in early Christian tradition, Mary being deemed the rose without thorns. Whether it is a stylistic or purposeful choice, the Air Fahter Artist does not include thorns on the vines of this rose. The flowers in either of the upper corners appear to be some species of violet, perhaps pansies. If this is the case, then according to Christian traditions, they symbolize the humility of the Virgin, a quality that would have been praised in the good Christian. The 3-lobed quality of the flowers also suggests the Holy Trinity, much like the roses. The row of 11 trees at the bottom of the Taufstein all appear to be evergreen trees, and are more than likely depictions of cedar trees. The cedar tree is a prominent symbol within the text of the Bible as a parable for one's growth as a Christian. Psalms 92 and 29 refer to the cedar of Lebanon and its capacity to grow both tall, wide, and deep, so that only the voice of God could uproot it. In this way, the Christian faith was supposed to root itself and remain strong in its believers, a good life lesson to the newly baptized. In interpreting the possible early Christian meanings associated with the mid-18th century Fraktur's visual symbols, the most significant symbol of all can be overlooked: the expression of individual faith with a larger world of both opportunity and religious freedom. Faith was important enough in these cultures that these families left ancestral homes for a dangerous new environment where various sects of Protestantism could be practiced freely. Objects such as Taufstein were imbued with so much meaning because these documents were reminders of religious reasons for migration in the first place, as they further affirmed freedom and purpose. German-American communities in the backcountry of South Carolina largely developed around the center point of a church for a religious and social haven within the tempestuous outside environment. Records from the pre-revolutionary Newberry County suggest that along with incidences with local Indian nations, many instances of robbery, murder, and rape largely went unchecked because of a lack of a formal penal system closer than Charleston. Organization around the church would have provided a grounding point for the community. This can be seen in Newberry through the 5 Fraktur of members of an extended family that were all connected to the same Lutheran Church of St. John. By referring to the biographical main text of each Fraktur, you can discover clues to familial ties within the community. Mary Houseal's Fraktur states, Maria Margaretha Houseal was born in South Carolina in Newberry County in the year after Christ's birth, 1787, 4th of April. Her parents were Friedrich Wilhelm Houseal and his Christian wife, Anna Maria, née Geiselhardt. She was brought to holy baptism by Mr. Waller, Lutheran preacher. Her sponsors were Johann Benedict Meyer and his wife. Mary's parents were both born in Germany, Wilhelm in 1730 in Heilbronn, and Anna Maria in 1751 in Württemberg. Other members of the community mentioned within the Frakturs had ancestors in southern Germany as well. Mary Margaret's Taufschein lists Johann Benedict Meyer and his wife as her sponsors, or more familiarly, her godparents. John Meyer was highly involved in St. John's Lutheran Church, being its treasurer for 39 years. Meyer's grandson, Dr. Orlando Benedict Meyer, was also active in the community, and in 1891 wrote a partial history of the Dutch Fork, according to his childhood memories growing up in Newberry County. Tragically, he died before completing the planned 11 installments for the local newspaper, the Newberry, South Carolina Herald and News. While the focus of the study lies upon the Taufschein of Maria Margaretha Haushiel, the Air Fahter Artist also composed Fraktur for two other women in Newberry County, Eva Margaretha Seuss and Mary Magdalena Sommer. These three Taufschein are so similar in form that there is little doubt that they were created around the same time. As documented by Colby and Holcomb in 1979, these three women were also related to each other and likely lived in a close community within the Dutch Fork that was served by a variety of pastors at St. John's. The history of St. John's Lutheran Church on Crims Creek, near present-day Pomeria, is of great importance to the Dutch Fork community, for it was one of the only churches available for much of the early days of Newberry County. The beginnings of St. John's was rooted in the group meetings of much of the community under the Reverend Christian Theus, a German Reformed pastor whom Hans Adam Sommer had met in the Saxe-Gotha Township in Lexington County around 1752. Reverend Theus spent well over 50 years, from 1739 to 1789, serving as an itinerant minister for the Saxe-Gotha and Dutch Fork communities. Evidence of his ministry can be found in a variety of church documents, most importantly in the Taufschein of Eva Margaretha Seuss, where he is listed as the presiding minister in her baptism in 1756. A little log cabin served as the first church and the schoolhouse in 1754 and was located on vacant land adjacent to the property of the newly arrived Reverend John Gasser, a Reformed minister from Switzerland. The 100-acre tract was bordered by 4 landowners, and roads and paths crossing the area led to a variety of other properties, including that of the Sommers, making the church an accessible physical center of the settlement. Additionally, in his recollections of the Dutch Fork, Orlando Meyer states that the center of the Dutch Fork, with such circumference, may be fixed at St. John's Church. Church and county history recall that the settlers did not have the means to fully support a minister, so Pastor Gasser dedicated himself to fundraising, finally gathering enough money for a new church and schoolhouse by 1763. The second church of 1763 was built of logs, hewn 6 by 10 inches, the corners dovetailed in the old German style, and stood about 100 yards away from the location of the third church, the old white church, built in 1809. All of the nails, hinges, and other hardware used in the building of this third church were purportedly handmade in the workshop of Captain John A. Sommer, Mary Haushiel's husband. This claim is supported by the image of an anvil on Captain Sommer's headstone marking him as a blacksmith. It was obviously well constructed, for the old white church of St. John was in use for worship for over 141 years and still stands today. The church was built under the leadership of the Reverend Frederick Joseph Wallern, the 8th pastor of the congregation, and more importantly, the presiding pastor on the Taufschein of Maria Margaretha Haushiel in 1787, though his name is spelled Waller there. Pastor Wallern is also mentioned in another of the Air Fahter Artist Taufschein from nearby Lexington County. The baptismal certificate of Elizabeth Mutza lists Wallern as the baptizing minister in 1786, and it is also visually similar to the 3 Taufschein from Newberry County. Elizabeth's relationship to the Newberry Sommers family is through her mother's side, along with the visual similarities of the 4 Fraktur and the presence of Pastor Wallern on 2 of the 4 documents leads to the conclusion that families within the greater area of the Dutch Fork largely remain connected through St. John's Church. All 5 of his known Fraktur from the area, including the 2 from Lexington County, are officiated by pastors who are known to have ministered at St. John's. Seuss by Theus in 1756, Mary Sommer by Froelich in 1780, John Herman Aul by Hockheimer in 1786, and Maria Haushiel and Elizabeth Mutza by Wallern in 1787 and 1793. It is likely that the artist created these pieces while residing in South Carolina at the turn of the 19th century. As mentioned before, the central focus on the pastors of St. John's, and thus on their baptismal congregation, as dispersed as it might have been, shows that commissions more than likely would have spread through the church families. The 5 subjects were born and baptized within a 37-year period, from 1756 to 1793, and the wedding date on Mary Summers' Peace dates the group to at least 1799 or afterwards. The other 3 Taufschein of Mary Househeel, Elizabeth Mutza, and John All do not contain marriage dates because they were not married until 1804, 1810, and 1818 respectively. Thus, like Colby and Holcomb suggest in their 1979 article, there's a 5-year window from 1799 to 1804 in which the Air Fahter Artist more than likely created this group of Fraktur. The Fraktur of Yves Seuss may cause some doubt as to its date of creation, for it appears as if some of the sections have been left blank and then were filled in later by a different hand. But those sections are peculiar, and this Fraktur was definitely almost fully completed by the original artist. As to why this occurred is up to interpretation. The other 4 Taufschein are completed entirely by the Air Fahter Artist. The formal similarities between the 4 Fraktur made for the women openly demonstrate that the pieces are related. They are all in a vertical format with the arched heading, a form that the Air Fahter Artist is known for, though only 3 say Air Vater und Mutter. Yves Seuss's Taufschein has the heading Jesus mein Zuversicht, or Jesus mein Kompetenz. The 4 all have elements of the typical decoration that artist uses, including parrots, various flowers, pansies and roses, evergreen trees, towers, and hearts. Each detail has different meanings within the Christian range, so the artist could have developed an overall message for each woman, or simply created a spectrum between all 4 pieces so that they could be unique. Elizabeth Mutza's Fraktur, especially in its highly damaged state, has quite a few unique formal elements, including hearts with spiraling text around a circle, geometric starbursts or flowers at either bottom corner, large tulips on either side, and 2 groupings of 7 evergreen trees. The juxtaposition of similarities and differences in form reflect that there is a relationship between the women through extended family, but that this Fraktur of this particular woman was born in an adjoining county. The Fraktur for John All, however, has an entirely different format. The horizontal composition is relatively rare in the Air Fahter Artist's known work, and while it shares most of the usual decorative vocabulary of the other pieces, the presence of the geometric designs at either bottom corner sets it apart from the other South Carolina examples. Nevertheless, the piece is most definitely related, for it shares the same inspirational choral verse from Das Blut Jesus Christi as that of Yves Seuss. Though it can only be conjecture at this point, perhaps the format of John All's piece was different as to make it distinctive from the female pieces, or maybe the artist allowed for some creative input from his commissioners within the realm of his usual design formulas. The presence of the watermark on Mary Househeel's Taufschein further affirms the creation of the document in the area, for another Fraktur from a different artist in the same general area has the same mark. The marks on a Househeel piece include AB 1799 underneath the ark, and a crest of Britannia with a crown above and the initials AB in cursive script underneath the prayer at the bottom of the page. The 1797 Fraktur of the death memorial of Elizabeth Lorman is by an unknown maker in Lexington County, carries a mixture of both the Househeel marks. An encircled cursive AB mark similar to the text below the Britannia crest sits above the 1797, done in the same text as the 1799 of the first watermark on the Househeel piece. The marks appear to be that of Anne Blackwell, a paper maker at Nash Mill in Hertfordshire, England. This imported paper was likely obtained through a merchant or chain of merchants from either Augusta or Charleston. Fraktur have been extensively studied since the 1970s, but the influx of new research, especially in community life of the areas in which they were created, can shed new light on the importance of the pieces and the meaning of the symbolism within them. By way of 30 years of further research on Fraktur art in the community of the Dutch Fork, the re-examination of 5 previously studied Taufschein has led to a better perception of life in the early days of the South Carolina backcountry. In commissioning these illustrated documents, this community of German-American settlers, centered around St. John's Lutheran Church, perpetuated their European heritage and incorporated it into their new American identity. I would like to thank everyone at MESDA for the wonderful opportunity to study this and many other beautiful pieces. Working with you has been such a pleasure. Thank you.